So when I started web design, I had zero coding skills. I did not know how to code. I just knew that this was a solution to many, at the time, many like small mom and pop type businesses. When I first started out, I didn't necessarily have the skill set, let's say, but I was able to build a business and figure those things out. But in terms of investment, that's where I started out with the $9.99.
Welcome to Beating the Odds, the podcast about successful minority businesses that will inspire, educate, and inform you. Your host is Mike Dewey, entrepreneur and founder of Hidden Star, a 501c3 nonprofit that has helped hundreds of minority entrepreneurs start and grow their businesses. Discover and celebrate minority business success with Beating the Odds.
Okay, thanks for joining us today. And on the show today is Daniel Griggs. He is the founder and president of ATX Web Designs in Austin, Texas. Daniel, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Mike?
Doing great. We can't thank you enough for being on the show to provide inspiration to future minority entrepreneurs as they get started. And at the beginning here, can you kind of give us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, your childhood, and all that?
Yeah, most definitely. So I'm from a small town called Van Vleck, Texas, in about southeast Texas, about an hour south of Houston. Great childhood growing up, great parents. I'm actually a PK, preacher's kid. I was extremely active when I was younger. Some people may say I was a bad child, but I just say I was active. But sports was always a major thing, both just for me in general and then my family as well. And so I grew up doing a lot of sports. I kind of say I did the unorganized sports, which is just in my neighborhood, playing football, racing, basketball, anything you can think of, just very active. And then when I got to middle school, just doing football, basketball, track. And then when I got out of high school, I went and played at a private school called McMurray University. I did both football and track. And I majored, got my degree in 4 years in business marketing. I went on to play pro football for about 4 or 5 years. And so I played on some arena teams in Seattle and New Orleans. Had some opportunities with the Jets and the Jaguars and workout. And then from there, I basically I make it sound like it was a quick, smooth process right now. But from there, I moved on from doing pro sports to the business world per se. Or as my mentor told me at that time, now it's time to figure out what I want to do when I grow up.
Yeah, well, let me know when you figure that one out. So, when you were a child, did you have ambitions of being a business owner? Were there, sounds like your childhood ambitions were about the same as mine. We grew up to be a famous professional athlete. But secondarily, were there any kind of business ambitions in there?
When I was younger, I wouldn't say there was a huge amount of ambition, kind of visual things. I can't remember what movie it was that I seen, but I seen some movie, and it was around marketing. I'm 35 years old, so when I was coming up, the advertisement and marketing were done on like magazines and things like that. And so I was like, hey, I want to, I forget the movie, but it was like a group of people and we're coming up with different. Oh, you know what? I know what the movie is. A lot of people laugh at this. With Eddie Murphy when he worked at I forget the name of that movie, but he was working at a office with a whole bunch of different women, etc. That wasn't the motivation, but you get the point is that he was working like his advertising agency, and he was coming in with a suit. And he was thinking these great ideas, and everything was going great, etc. And so, honestly, I kind of seen that, and I was like, man, that looks cool. So I always said like I wanted to go to work and have on a suit and do marketing and collaborate, etc., etc. The whole suit thing didn't really last because I'm not a suit guy like that. But in general, just seeing that, that's what I wanted to do. I've always felt like I was creative in some sense, and so I didn't really, go into college or was thinking like I don't know what I want to major in per se. I can't say I knew what I wanted to do in my career specifically outside of, what I've seen, but I knew I wanted to do something around business marketing.
Did you have family members or friends in your orbit when you were a kid that were entrepreneurs or business owners that you could look to?
No, I didn't. A huge part. There's two parts to it. One, I give 100% of my credit to my parents. I looked at them as entrepreneurs in a way. It wasn't really a word to say entrepreneurs, back when I was growing up. But my dad was and still is a pastor, and started up the church and the way that he did things and structured things. And my mom was involved as well. She has a nonprofit that's catered to women, and they do conferences and different things. And so I've seen these things, and I've seen the way they structured these things, and they both work full-time jobs, and they really did it for, on their end, they did it really at no cost. My dad didn't take any type of salary or anything like that from the church. He built it up, he ran it, he put things in place, and they did a lot. And so I paid attention to those things, and I paid attention to the way that they moved with them. And I say I paid attention, it wasn't anything like I've always been the type of person that would just kind of notice things. I didn't say much about it. Sometimes I ask questions around it, but I always see it, and then it kind of gets stored in my memory bank, per se. And then on the other part of that, honestly, I did sports for so long that when it comes to business, it is very much just like, how I prepare for sports, and the same drive and ambition, and really around a lot of the same thought process. So I would say a combination of those two things has been a huge part of what's allowed me to be as successful as I've grown today in my business.
What was your first job?
The first actual job I had was planting grass. I'm a country boy. I'm from the country, so I lived about 15 minutes away from like where the school was in main town, and I didn't have like a vehicle or transportation to go work at like a Walmart, Popeyes, or something like that. And so I had family members that owned just a business that they went and planted grass in like the suburbs of Houston and Pearland or Santa Fe or anywhere outside of or inside of Houston in these new subdivisions. And so my first job was waking up at about 5 a.m, getting in the big doodly truck with pallets of grass on the back, and we would drive about an hour into Houston and planting grass from 6:30 in the morning until about 6 p.m., 7 p.m. in the evening. So that was kind of like technically my first job.
I've heard the rumor it gets hot in Houston in the summertime.
Oh man, it gets. I mean, you're talking about both with the sun beaming down on you, and then where we're at, the humidity is so thick that you always just you're always sweating and all types of things, and so it got extremely hot. So doing that, then working out for getting ready for football season and all those things as well. So it was a combination of both of them. But it was I felt like it was a lot of money I was making at the time. This was back in about between 2002 and 2005, and I was getting like $300 a week or something like that. When you do the math, it's not that much, but when you look at it as a teenager, I was like, oh, this is a lot of money.
So is ATX Web Designs your first business?
It's I would say it's my first serious business. And so kind of to take you through the journey with that of how I got to that part. When I got done playing football, I was already doing like sports training, athletic training. And then I was also doing, for some dumb reason, I was trying to do apparel, like athletic apparel. I have no type of fashion sense in that way at all. And then I was doing web design work, specifically at the beginning, but that started with it started because I built a website for, the sports training I was doing. And then my last year when I was playing in New Orleans, a good buddy of mine, he won the Super Bowl with the Packers. He was from Miami, Antonio Robinson. And so I built like a website for him and was helping him with marketing for like a nonprofit he was starting. He had a great story, etc. And just like this whole digital transformation that I did for him, I really enjoy it. I like the success that came along with it as well, specifically for him. And so I was really juggling those three things at once. And then my mentor kind of going back with it saying you got to choose one. And so the reason I went, the route when it comes to, all things internet, I guess you can say, specifically web design at that time, it really came down to it because I was like, I'm able to grow this. Two reasons. One, I'm able to grow this into an actual business, not just something I do on the side. And then two, at the same time, it allowed me to be home more versus like athletic training, being with my family, etc.
Got it. And did you pick web design and all things internet just as a result of your relationship with your friend, or was that something that your lifelong interest in marketing and advertising just fell into? In particular, how did you pick to be a web design company?
Well, I think it was a mixture of both. Right? If I go back to the movies I seen and growing up, and I was like, hey, I want to do something where I can collaborate and really build something together and see it come to fruition. I feel like web design, is and digital transformation is what actually allows me to do that now. So the exact same thing, different setting per se, but I'm still collaborating with whether it be clients, whether it be my internal team and staff. We're still collaborating and, creating products, I guess you can say, online that's allowing other people and businesses to be successful. So I feel like that combination of those things right there is what really drew my interest and really made me gravitate more toward that.
Were you able to start the company bootstrapping it, or did you need to get financing to help get started?
I bootstrapped it. I didn't know anything about seeking financing or investment or any of those. I have an article I believe it's in Inc. or Forbes, one or the other, but it talks about how I started it with $9.99. So when I started web design, mind you, when it comes to web development, I had zero coding skills. I did not know how to code. I just knew that this was a solution to at the time, many like small mom and pop type businesses. And so I was building out websites on drag and drop Wix.com. And so I started there, and then I reached out to some people and got an understanding of like building websites on WordPress and got my first developer, et cetera, et cetera. And so I kind of moved along in that way. But when I first started out, I didn't necessarily have the skill set per se. But I was able to build a business and figure those things out. But in terms of investment, that's where I started out with $9.99. I didn't have a lot of money. I was paying bills basically, paycheck to paycheck because I was transitioning from athletic training over to doing, trying to start this web development company full time. So there wasn't a lot of wiggle room in terms of getting money to get it started and those different things.
How did you start getting the word out once you started this thing? And thank goodness it didn't cost $10 because you only had $9.99. How did you start getting the word out to get more business?
Really cold calling. Cold calling and cold emailing, but a lot of cold calling. So I'll mention this. So, as I mentioned earlier, I did sports for so long that I relate a lot of things to it. When I went and played, I was pursuing my career in NFL. I came from a very small school. No one knew about me. We lost like every single game my senior year. I had great stats, but nobody was looking at a school that small that wins no games. And so I literally cold called and emailed every single NFL team, all 32. And I got the Jaguars and the Jets on the phone. Now, I went through the exact same process, ironically, right? Now, doing these things, not even thinking about them. But when I started my business, and I was like, all right, how am I going to get clients? And I literally followed the exact same process as I did when I was, pursuing that. And so I was cold calling. My very first client, I was literally sitting at a a red light like half a mile up the road from my house. And there was a pest control truck in front of me. Really nice light wrapped around it, had the website, had their phone number. So I seen it, and so I went to the website, and I was like, oh, this looks terrible. And so I was looking to see what they had online, how easily they can be found or not. And just their online presence wasn't there. And so I literally called them up in traffic. At the time, this is in 2015. And so at the time, he was building up this company as well. So I called him up in traffic. I said, hey, I forget exactly what I pitched him on, but basically I told him I went to your website, told him I'm a um, local web developer, and I basically not just make your website better, but get you more customers and clients. And he was like, hey, I think that's great. Let's meet tomorrow. And so I got to the house. I put up like a little mock-up design that was better than what he had. Showed him some stats, how I can make sure he can get found online a lot better and get more leads. And that was the first actual project that I closed. And so I would do that. And then when it came to the cold calling, just to give a understanding of like the structure of my days, I would sit down on like Mondays and Tuesdays, actually Sunday, over the weekend basically. I would create these cold call lists. I would look up a lot of different businesses in the area, specific by industry, and I was writing things down on pen and pad. I didn't know anything about CRMs or whatever other stuff. And so I would write down the name of the business, the name of the best point of contact, the phone number, and if I could find the email. And then,
right.
Mondays and Tuesdays, I would just bust out and start making cold calls and trying to book meetings for that week. Like, let me come in and show you what I can do better for you. And I would book them for like Tuesday through Friday, or should I say Wednesday through Friday. And then I would make all my cold calls on Monday and Tuesday, and then go and try to close those deals Wednesday through Friday. So that's a lot of manual work, but that's how I just kind of grinded it out and started my business.
Isn't it amazing how responsive entrepreneurs are when you talk to them about helping them grow their business?
Exactly. It's always one of those things that, as I mentioned, when I say, things like digital transformation, or if I even mention anything online, such as, SEO, being found online, or website design, etc., these are specific, what I just call it, tools in a toolbox that you pull out that help entrepreneurs, small business owners grow their business. But that's the whole point of it all. With whatever, tool it is that's going to fit, be the solution to that problem. The whole point is that you want to make sure that you can grow the business and make these businesses more money.
Was there ever a point when you thought it might not work?
You know what I did? I would say at the beginning, I approached things with a lot of confidence. I won't say I always have the confidence, but I've just learned over time, especially from sports, is if I at least approach it with the confidence, then I can at least, make myself continue to push and do it. But I did. I had a lot of doubt. Mostly because I would say I didn't know anyone. I didn't see anyone that was trying to do anything that I was doing. Specifically, I'm talking about building basically a digital marketing agency. I didn't know anybody that looked like me. I didn't know anybody that played sports, that went off and did anything like that. Right. I had other, people in my Rolodex that did other things just from a general business perspective. But I was trying to do something that I wasn't familiar with. I didn't really have anyone that I could speak with about and get any guidance with, specifically for what I was doing, this industry. And so that was more so the fear part per se. It was kind of like I was figuring things out as I go, which was, I'm grateful for it now, but there was a lot of fear around it. A lot of people can do things and it's like you're doing it different than someone else, but it's a lot more difficult when you're doing something that's a completely different industry, completely different clients and customers, and you don't really have anybody that you can ask advice for.
And how long ago was that? When did you start?
I started like at the end of 2014. This is when I started. I wasn't all in though. I was bouncing back between. I was still doing like web design work, doing athletic training, etc. And then I finally weeded out everything else and went full time into trying to grow my my digital transformation company.
Got it. And I'm assuming if there wasn't much financing, it was mainly at the beginning you doing the work. It wasn't long until you were profitable, almost from the jump, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I was, profitable from the jump because I was doing everything myself. I mean, trading, basically using my time. Now, as it built up, those are things that you have to start to pay attention to. Meaning, when I started to bring on staff, and then as you continue to grow, and you actually start doing other forms of marketing, etc. But from the jump, I was profitable, and then, from then as I started to bring on more staff, I brought on my first um, developer, who's actually um, he's my head development manager right now. He over all of our developers. I brought him on like around the beginning of fall of 2015, and that's when had to start to figure out, okay, like, how do I make sure I keep making profit? What makes sense, etc.
How many employees do you have now?
Currently, I have about 27 staff. So from project managers, development team, assistants, and content writers, designers, etc.
So effectively, in 6 years, when you've been going at this full time, seriously, you've gone from you trying to figure it out on the fly to 27 plus you, 28 people in your company. That's amazing.
Correct. Yeah.
That is fantastic. Now, has anybody ever approached you to sell your business to them?
Yeah, I have. Probably in the past few years. But it's not to that point yet right now to where it's something that was like, it was interesting to hear about, but it wasn't at the point where I was like, yeah, I want to sell it and move on. So I kind of got like a visual goal around that. So, that's not anything right now that I was willing to do.
What's been the hardest thing in starting and growing your business? What's the hardest thing you've encountered?
Um, I would say the scaling. It's an ongoing thing. What I mean by that is, if I could create kind of like this timeline where it's just me and I'm doing these things and putting in the time, everything's so fresh and new that, I'm not really like, my gears are just going. And then I bring on my first developer. Then it's like, all right, I have to pay him this much for each project. And then, he was doing it on the side per se because he had a full-time job. He was like, all right, let me get him away from that. But then I got to consistently bring in business for him. I'm going to pay him a salary, and then just growing it and continue to growing it. You have to start to figure out other things that I'm not an expert in. Or even if I'm not saying to be an expert, like I don't have knowledge of, right? You don't really think about profit until you start to look at it and you're like, all right, well, I got this much money in the business bank account, but now I need to, like, it's in here now, but now I got to pay off this salary at the end of the month or every other week, etc. And so you have to start to account for a lot of different things that you don't have knowledge around, you're not familiar with, you don't understand. Even we're talking about basics, so it's such as, are you, at first I just had a DBA. That was the easiest thing to do. I didn't have however many X amount of dollars to go and create an LLC, so it was a DBA, and then now I need to make sure I have an LLC set up. Well, how do I know if I'm setting it up right? A whole bunch of different things that just go into business as you continue to grow it and scale it. When I say scale it, I'm not just talking about the amount of money. I'm talking about the gross revenue, the net revenue, the taxes part of it, making sure we get the right staff and onboarding processes and all of those different things. So when you're talking about from, 2015 to now 2022, there's so many different things that I had to learn. There's so many different books that I've had to read and advice that I've had to seek, just both during the hard times and then trying to prepare for the times that'll come that I will need the information. So I would say, for me personally, that's the hardest part of business. I can't really pinpoint one like very difficult time. I mean, I would say there's been a couple times in business to where I was very stressed out because it basically came down to what I mentioned, meaning there's gross revenue, but the net isn't where it needs to be, and these different things. But all of those things combined really is kind of it's the hardest part of running a business. There's going to be moments and times to where it seems like it's most stressful, but just throughout the process, from the moment you begin it and going on, you're always going to run into difficulties of figuring out the next steps on how to scale the company.
If you had to pick, what's been the most, so that's the hardest thing, and it's hard for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
What's been the most surprising thing to you?
I say this is the most surprising thing, honestly, is the way people gravitate to me. I would say I love the marketing, but I love sales as well. There was always some, if I'm being transparent, insecurities, I guess you could say, because being in the industry and then talking to people, I have a very, I'm cleaning it up, but I have a very country accent.
Yes, you do.
Sports realm and things like that. And I've always just like, you can't, I can effectively, speak in an effective way and those different things, but I just have an accent. And so honestly, when I first started, I was like, man, people are going to take me for a joke because, I draw out my words or I may not speak as fast or something like that, but it's an accent. Honestly, that was probably like me being surprised how people gravitated to that is I was actually surprised. Completely opposite of what I was just thinking in my head. So I know there may be different answers than most people give, but that's probably one of the most surprising things.
Well, it's true. I mean, there are some people, and there's just no way to know, but people just click, and all of a sudden you're having success in a field that there wasn't any good reason to believe that you would, right? And that
exactly
sounds like you. Now, a couple of times you've mentioned a mentor and all that. Who did you turn to for guidance? Who the mentorship group, and who did you lean on as your business was just taking off?
When I first started, as I told you, I was doing athletic training, and when I was transitioning, there was a guy at the gym that I was training. I trained his son. His name was Tim Randall, and he did a lot of stuff. He was very successful when it came to real estate. And I actually I bartered a deal with him. He was like, you train my son, and I'll mentor you. And at the time, honestly, I needed the money, but I knew he was successful. I was just thinking to myself, I was like, things that this guy would give me is going to be way more than, $50, $60 an hour from training.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, cool, we'll do that. And so he did. He actually gave me a lot of structure on how to conduct my days and the way that I need to think about my business. And as it grows, we met like once or twice a week, and there was things that he expected from me, like how many leads, how many cold calls did you make, how many did you close on, these different things that really helped propel me really quickly in getting the business started and running it, right? I had to hustle and I had to grind, but just having the business knowledge to get those things started, that was huge. So he was, my first mentor. And then for me to actually, when I was telling you earlier about I didn't know anyone that did anything around, anything on the internet in that capacity. He told me, he said, I need to speak with someone. I said, I don't know anybody. He said, Google, call up one of these companies, get the, person that owns it on the phone and tell them I'll get you a cup of coffee or something. Just learn from them. That was very uncomfortable, but I did it anyway. It took me like a month. And then he finally was like, where's the phone call? Like, when are you going to stop beating around the bush? And I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I called a guy who is actually like a direct competitor now, but we're really great friends. And I kind of called like I was a potential, client. And then I just told him, I said, hey, man, I'm like a freelancer. I'm trying to build up my business. I'd love to hear your story. Like, I'd love to take you to lunch and hear your story. And he was like, yeah, man, that'd be great. And so I was really surprised. And I was more surprised because, as I mentioned, I come from a sports background. If it's a competitor, you don't really give them advice. And so I'm like, somebody's going to give me advice, right? But I met with him, and it was amazing. I mean, we were supposed to meet for like 45 minutes. We ended up chatting for like 2.5 hours. I heard his story. He had an incredible story. He told me he actually started off just like I did. And he said he really did the exact same thing. He said, I think he said he was known a guy that was doing it, and he reached out to him, and he was like, when you reached out to me and you mentioned that, he said, I looked at it as my opportunity to basically, help someone just like someone helped me. And I mean, I'm telling you, when we left that, lunch meeting I had with him for, 2 to 3 hours, from the moment I left and after we met, I already knew, like, all right, my business is about to be 10 times better. I have an understanding of what I need to do, how to grow it more, and the next steps to where I want to get. And so he was a mentor of mine as well. And then as the company grows, I ran into some incredible people that just gave me an extended hand out and advice to really for no more than just wanting to see me be successful. I don't know if they may have just seen the ambition that I had or whatever it may be. But I've had people, I would say a couple other people from a business perspective that's come across me, and, the life of my business has helped out a lot.
So if you had to pick one, which is more important in your business success, ambition or talent?
For me, I would probably say ambition. And the reason I say that is because you can have talent, but if you don't have the work ethic with it, if you don't have the ambition with it that has to be paired with it, then it's nothing. It's just there, right? All of it, like you hear somebody say something about someone, whether it be sports or anything else, it's just like all of that talent wasted. But when you have an ambition, even if you don't have the talent, you can do enough to be able to attain whatever the skill is that you need and still be successful. And, if I gave a sports kind of analogy with that, I've played with and against many people that were, we'll say just teams in general. There's teams that you can play against that teams can play against, and one team can just automatically know that other team has way less talent than they do. But that other team is very disciplined. That other team executes. That other team doesn't make many mistakes. So they can have less talent and they can still win with way less talent. So that's how I look at it. My ambition, my desire to be successful is way bigger and way stronger than the amount of talent that I have. And so because of that, that's what actually has driven me to not just grind and make money, but have an understanding of how to build a business and be willing to learn and be willing to listen to others and then choose what's going to be the best things that I need to do that fits my goals.
So if you were giving advice to an aspiring entrepreneur right now, and you are, what's the biggest challenge they're going to face? What advice would you give them?
For me, my personal perspective, I would say the biggest challenge is going to be yourself. And I don't just mean that in a way of it's all on you and you can be successful as you want to. I know that's, typical motivating stuff. But what I'm talking about is understanding who you are will actually allow you to be more successful. I like to kind of be in my thoughts kind of person. So I'm always identifying and looking at, why did I make this decision? Why do I think this way? Why am I thinking this way? If I read something, how does this apply to me, etc. So being able to, when I say, bettering yourself, being able to get outside of who you are, whether it be naturally who you are or how you become to be. If you're a person that's, extremely stubborn and I'm not going to listen to anybody else, or I know exactly how this needs to be, then you may have to adjust some of those things. It's going to be good at sometimes, but then sometimes you're going to have to adjust them, and you're going to have to be open to what other people's thoughts are, open to other advice, etc. So the more you can understand who you are when it comes to the decisions that you make for your business, then this is going to allow you to be even more successful. And even if you are successful, let's say, on a flip side of that, you are very successful for whatever that may look like for you, then also being able to be happy within that success. There's a lot of people that, very successful, a lot of money in the bank, things are going great from a business perspective, but there's not any form of happiness with it, right? And so if you don't really figure out what makes you happy, and we'll just talk about, there's a lot of things in life from family and all types of things, but if we just talked about it practically from a business perspective, there's still a sense of what makes me happy with waking up every day and doing what in my business. And if I'm not at that point yet, how do I get there? But again, that kind of goes back to understanding yourself, understanding, the decisions you make, and then the person that you are.
Got it. So are there any challenges that you have faced as a minority entrepreneur that someone who is not a minority entrepreneur would not have faced?
I would say there's two parts to that. One, maybe I could be naive on it. There's things that I know of, but it's hard for me to pinpoint and say if I actually experienced. I don't know if anybody may have, if we're talking very specific, I don't know if anybody may have said, hey, I'm not going to go with this company because the owner is a black guy or something like that. I've never came across anything like that or lost a project because of it. If I have, there's only one that I specifically know of to where something happened. There was like early in 2015, and I had a meeting with the older couple. And mind you, I got this country accent, so maybe they thought I was a white guy instead of a black guy. And so I had a meeting with them, and I pulled up at the house. And the lady, she was everything nice on the phone, and I even called, getting the directions when I was almost there. And when I stepped out of the car, I just seen just like her whole body language and face would change, and she didn't really want to talk to me. And I left after like 15 minutes. And my mentor at that time, who was a white guy, but I told him about it because he had been telling me I need to put myself on the website. And I actually told him, I said, no, I don't want to. And just because of that one, that one situation, right, only happened once, was the only reason I didn't, because I was thinking to myself, I don't know if I want people to know that I'm black. Now, other than that, there are things that I have knowledge of in terms of, now for my business, for ATX itself, there's not any investment or funding that I've needed. But I have other entities such as, Event Space, which is a mental health app, and Artistry Plug, which is a streaming app for music artists. There's things that I needed in terms of funding for that.
Right.
And there's steps I've taken and people that I've spoken with that aren't minority, and taking those steps and things. And I have noticed that there's kind of like a struggle with that, unless there's specific connections that you have. And even with that, it depends on who it is. And so I know that, and I've had clients as well that's had those same kind of situations. So for me, those are probably the only two things that I could actually, that I think of when it comes to as a minority business owner are the biggest hurdles. And I would probably say the funding part is probably the biggest. That's not just from a personal experience with me myself, but experience with other minority business owners as well, both Black, Latinos, and women in general.
So are there any statistics or facts that you'd like to share with our listeners about the growth of your company or where you're going or any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of throw this out as an example of scale and growth. Over the years, the income, should I say, the revenue for the company has grown dramatically, year in and year in. We're talking about 200%. 1 year is like 400 something percent, and it continues to. The thing what I will say with that is that always look at things from a high level. Just because things are going really great doesn't mean that you won't run into hurdles that could either, kind of slow down that growth or be a yield to it, et cetera. And what I mean by that is we have an amazing growth in those things, but then when the pandemic hit, the type of audiences that we work with, which, we had switched over at the time to like mostly a lot of big corporate companies. They were the ones that kind of like threw us away first and didn't pay out, outstanding invoices, etc. But the ones that we work with now and the ones that actually did stick around was the small business owners. And what I mean by that is I'm not just talking about entrepreneurs And, one of the few people I'm talking about, maybe a small business that I always say making, $8 million or less, right? They may be one or two people,
Right.
or they may have 14 people or so. But we start with, small business owners that we work with, or even, we work a lot with law firms and franchises as well. What happened is that because we've always grown with them over the
Right.
years, their loyalty to us, was kind of based on what you mentioned earlier, right? Growing their business. ATX and Daniel has been growing the business from the beginning. Before I say, we're going to stop doing anything, let me speak with them to see what's the plan or the strategy, or if we can expect any type of, decrease in whatever because of the pandemic or because of the situation, et cetera. And because we have relationships with them, we didn't have any of them get off board and be like, hey, we're going to stop with this, or we're not going to make this payment, et cetera. And so it was easy to strategize with them to continue to grow their business. So from a statistical standpoint, the numbers vary when it comes to other businesses, but I had a dramatic amount of growth from a revenue perspective over the years. Again, we talk about 200+%, 400+%, and it continues to go. But as I said, paired with that, don't make the mistake I did and just kind of like, oh, things are always things are going great. Nothing will happen, but something happened, which is, it was unfortunate, but from a business perspective, it was fortunate because it made me understand who we need to make sure we always focus on.
So if anybody's want to get a hold of you and use you and your company for services that they need, how would they get a hold of you?
Most definitely. If you want to use us for our services, or if you want a consultation in the chat, you can go to ATX Web Designs.com. That's designs with an S. And anything I have online, I'm not a big influencer person and a whole bunch of things on social media, but if you go to DanielOGriggs.com, it has a lot of information on there about me, different articles I wrote in Forbes, Inc., and other publications as well that will be very helpful to you.
Well, great. So hopefully they'll reach out and receive the benefit of all the things you've learned since you started this thing. And Daniel, congratulations on your incredible success. I know it's inspiring to our audience, and heck, I know that because it's inspiring to me. So thank you for your time, and good luck, and we will talk soon.
Most definitely. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Thank you for listening. We hope you were informed and inspired. Now we would like to ask a favor of you. If you could please leave us a review on the podcast platform and follow us, that would be great. And please share us with your network and help support minority business. Thank you.